interest in Japan. I mean, I know you travel a lot to various places, but you seem to have done more in Japan than almost anybody else I've come across.
I'm not sure I've got a totally rational answer to that. I think clearly within the context of the university that I work in, there's a long tradition, an association with Japan, and we've got many contacts through our alumni, through our cultural links that have come up through students who studied with us and gone on to become very influential both in art and design and also in fashion. So there's a strong institutional link with Japan and the kind of permeability of the relationship through student mobility. And we've got some extremely high-profile alumni. So there's the institutional link. There's also, for me, a much more personal sense of engagement with some of the cultural values that I don't begin to fully understand, but that seem to make a lot of sense to me in terms of how that balance between self and environment is in a much more harmonious relationship than I found in other places that I've worked, and that if I'm looking to somehow balance the influences of my work, the other part of it is predominantly based in the Arctic region, where I spent a lot of time looking at the effects of climate change on glaciers, on temperature warming. I think everyone's familiar with that debate. I shan't detail it, but it does actually give me a very simple kind of cause and effect relationship. That what happens in our urban conurbations affects what happens in our remote areas, and what happens in our remote areas affects those urban conurbations. So the kind of threats of climate change, for instance, are very, very focused in a region like the Sea of Japan and the kind of that whole kind of East Asia seaboard. So it seemed to me to be a counterpoint to some of those effectual issues, as well as having that spiritual resonance of a set of cultural values that seem not to exist in other places.
And how does the earthquake and the nuclear power accident fit into all this? I mean, your error signs suggest that something went wrong in the relationship between people and the environment in Japan. How did you respond to that?
I waited a long time before I did respond. I mean, I was in Tokyo 4 days before the earthquake, which, I'm not sure what my response would have been if I'd been there at the time, but I didn't go back there for a long time because the whole of that region seemed to be a kind of feeding frenzy for documentary photographers, and I'm not a documentary photographer. Not that I don't respect that profession, but I just thought this is not the place to go right now to capitalise in a sort of obvious way on that misfortune. That I wanted to spend time to really think about how best to respond, if at all, and I wanted to see if I could lock that event, catastrophic as it was, into some continuation of work which I'd already been doing, whether that would make sense or not. And I got the opportunity through Tokyo Wonder Site to visit there with a group of artists, and to, in a sense, work with some local artists to test whether or not the ideas that I had would have any resonance at all, or would just be seen as a further kind of cultural exploitation of a disastrous kind of consequence, which I have no ability to do anything with, other than to have empathy. And that was why I did the work I did, which tangentially addresses the issues, but more the nuclear power issue than the tsunami issue itself.
So did it still feel a bit uncomfortable to be up in that region, you know, as it were, making art out of the debris from the accident?
Yes, it did feel uncomfortable. But equal to that sense of discomfort was, this may be something you can explain better than I can, is how the response to the way that region is now is much more positively being addressed by artists than by any other aspects of our society. I witnessed, what I think I witnessed through translation, was the frustration of the local authorities who are trying to rebuild communities there, having conflict with the national government about policy. There's unbelievable impasse and different ways of thinking. And whilst that's going on, and while the whole political industry searches for a way forward, artists are doing projects there. Artists are making amazing projects. They're dealing with things in a very direct, very pragmatic, a very community-orientated way. And maybe you have more.
And they're not just art projects, are they?
No.
Yeah, I mean they're actual building things which are used.
Actually, I organized the meeting when we brought them to the disaster area. I asked to the one person responsible for urban redevelopment, and one is called the town of Rikuzen Takata. It's also all of the town is washed out, kind of a white out town. So he confessed to us quite uncomfortable and conflict in between national government and also the local government. He couldn't do anything. So he really wants to do to start the rebuilding, but national government doesn't allow to start. So but at the same time, creative people after the March 11th, we found out the amazing role of individual and also the artist. Of course, the two ways to respond to the issue in the society, and of course a direct action or activism or direct action to the society. But at the same time, a commitment by the artist is quite personal, perception. But it goes in all of the experience and also the kind of uncomfortableness and questions goes into very personal question. But it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and then express Chris's work, and then touch to the public, and then all of the the kind of works or commitment goes to public. It's quite different, two ways of the way to commit to the a society, but the way by the artist is very important. And then also for the people, I also noticed that after the 2 years after the disaster, people need, of course, hope. But hope is made by what? It's a leadership. It's not enough. It's actually, we found out the hope is made by imagination. Imagination is a kind of a key driver for the hope. So then art or a creative activity is making an imagination, or maybe facilitating or stimulating imagination. So that's why more and more artists is becoming more important, and also even in Arab Spring or kind of a many occasion of a social reform. Artists inspires kind of imagination. Imagination is a kind of seed for new thing. So that's why also, especially in Tohoku area, is a kind of commitment by the artist. It could be personal. It shouldn't be more a social activism. It's very important. At the same time, also Tokyo Wonder Side is I think it's very important to have like a continuing process. You know, like we're doing projects 7 years. You know, usually like art projects like finishes like preparing like 2 years. It happens like a firework. It's finished, and then we memorize. Oh, it was a very good exhibition. And that's it. But you know, we don't do that. So then we're doing a very continuing process, and then we're sharing, we're knowing each other. Actually, this is quite important for understanding cross-cultural understanding, not as like cliche type of like East and West or like kind of meeting others, but knowing each other and spending more and more time and or mutual agendas, and this is quite important. And then after we started residency, used to be artist residencies thinking about just 3 months residence or just 1 year and maybe maximum like 1 year residence. But we think about Chris is coming back again and again and again, and also other artists. Many of artists, like for example, one artist, a Vietnamese artist, Dinky Lee, he's like most famous, one of the leading artists in Vietnam, and he did a show at the MoMA and also collected, and several international museums. He's coming back again to one side, and then to think about his, it's so funny. He never had an experience of artist's residence before he came to one side. He started to coming back again and sharing the process of the question. This is, I guess, quite important, not just for result-oriented, like we do, is like more like a questioning process. Is sharing questioning processes, I think, very important.
Okay, I'm going to throw it open to all of you to ask questions, but so think what you want to ask. There was something I was going to ask just before I did that. Yes, I know what I was going to ask. It was, whether Japan really has changed in a kind of permanent way as a result of the earthquake, or whether life has sort of largely gone back to normal now in certainly Tokyo, which of course was not all that directly affected. How do you feel? Is the focus shifting away from Tohoku now? And
actually, when we met last time, we discussed about the big important, phenomena after the March 11th. As like I already talked, kind of a power of individual is becoming much more apparent, in Japan. It used to be like corporates or like governmental institutions or like a big group has a kind of dominant and big influence. But after the March 11th, we started to notice again about the power of individuals. People who has like a responsibility on a corporate or government, actually nuclear issues is a very, very sensitive issue. People couldn't tell anything about on that, But, artists is, artist is responsible for humanity. That's it. Not responsible any other than that. So then, artists became like amazing important the person who provide information, and also people go to as an individual to start helping societies, and also like he said, kind of. Decision by national government prevents to revitalize the society. But a small individual become a very, very big power. So this is actually we started, and then also after the March 11th, even in Japanese society, we started a kind of a crowdfunding also. People started to support small business, and then small business becoming actually the becoming more important than the big corporate projects. Actually, the Tohoku region, Tohoku tsunami disaster gave us a big impact to society, and also maybe the kind of deep into the value. What is a value?